So with that little background in mind, I want to finish up today, and don't get too excited. It's going to be a little longer than my usual conclusions. We did some singing before. We're going to do some singing again, but the story of 40 brave soldiers in the year 320 A.D. There was a detachment of the Roman legion which was in a town called Sebastia in modern-day Turkey now. Licinius was the emperor, and he had been kind to Christians in the past, but he kind of turned against them. He and Constantine were kind of rivals, and he was going against him. They had sharing parts of the Roman Empire, but he began a crackdown on Christians and demanded that they would worship his pagan gods. And specifically, the commander of the army soldiers were definitely included in that. But at this legion that was located there in Sebastia, among that legion, which was from 3,000 to 6,000 soldiers, some on horse, some footmen that were in that strategic location, but there were 40 men that professed to be Christians. We don't know why they were in the army, but they were, most loyal, faithful, brave, valiant soldiers. And when this decree came that Licinius had said, he was demanding that everybody worship the pagan gods, the other soldiers in that legion probably knew it's no problem for them. They didn't bother them at all, but there are 40 men here that claim to be followers of Jesus. And as those 40 men stood with the others at attention to hear the decree, are they going to compromise in order to have an easier time, perhaps their life? But they stood at attention to hear the decree. And this is a song where Tom Green wrote this song with putting a little bit of imagination to it, maybe 50 years ago. 40 brave soldiers for Jesus, 40 brave soldiers for Christ. We'll be true to our God and stare death in the face as we perish on this lake of ice. We'll be 40 brave soldiers for Christ. Well, the soldiers were dismissed. The captain came to the commander's tent and announced that there were 40 soldiers who would not perform the sacrifice. So they were immediately arrested and put into the custody of Aglius, the chief jailer. He marched them off to a military court. And the commander opened the trial's formality by saying, "Of all the soldiers who serve in the empire, none are more loved by us than you. Do not turn our love and respect to hate and contempt. How important can this Jesus be? Bow down to the emperor's command. This will be all over." But the leader of the 40 said firmly, "The word of God says, 'Thou shalt not have any gods before me.' We've made our choice. We will not sacrifice to the pagan gods. We will devote our love to the living God." 40 brave soldiers for Jesus, 40 brave soldiers for Christ. We'll be true to our God and stare death in the face, though we perish on this lake of ice. We'll be 40 brave soldiers for Christ. Because he didn't have the authority to sentence the Christians to death, the commander had to wait for the arrival of the inspector general, who would be making a visit to the 12th Legion in about a week. The Christians were put in the custody of Aglius, the jailer, for that entire week. When the general came, he agreed with the decision of the commander, gave the Christians a choice: worship the emperor or be delivered over to torture and death. The Christians remained firm. "You can have our armor," they said. "Our names, our very lives, we've made our choice. We prefer God." Then the soldiers heard their sentence. They were to be bound with strong rope and led to the shore of the nearby frozen lake. For at sundown they were to be stripped and marched out to the middle of the ice. At any time they could change their minds and go through the ritual of sacrifice in a heated bathhouse on the lake shore. Aglios, the jailer who had been caring for the soldiers for a week, watched as the soldiers were stripped and marched, shivering in the darkness, out on the ice. Guards were posted all around the shore to make sure they didn't try to escape. As they marched, they sang, 40 brave soldiers for Jesus, 40 brave soldiers for Christ. We'll be true to our God and stare death in the face, though we perish on this lake of ice. We'll be 40 brave soldiers for Christ. For a while, their song echoed all through the camp. But as the hour of midnight approached and the temperatures continued to drop, their voices grew more and more weak. Then one of the 40 was seen emerging from the darkness. He was giving up. He would sacrifice to the pagan gods. He fell to his knees on the shore and began crawling to the bathhouse. Only Aglios, the jailer, was still awake to hear the thin voices of the ones on the ice shiver, 39 brave soldiers for Jesus. Aglios watched the man enter the bathhouse, emerged quickly, apparently overcome by the heat. He saw the man collapse on the ground and lie still. At that moment, something happened to the heart of Aglios, the jailer. What it was, only he and God will ever know. The guards reported hearing a great cry, which jerked them awake. Rubbing their eyes, they watched as Aglios, the jailer, wrenched off his armor, ran out onto the frozen lake shouting, 40 brave soldiers for Jesus, 40 brave soldiers for Christ. We'll be true to our God and stare death in the face as we perish on this lake of ice. We'll be 40 brave soldiers for Christ. The Bible says the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you when you're persecuted. And that man saw something, supernatural light, according to what other accounts man, but something caused him to say, I want what they've got. Same thing, the thief on the cross saw Jesus offering forgiveness as he poured out his life there, as he suffered for us and gave us an example of suffering in the things that we do. But there is a beauty that comes from a life that is yielded up to God, a life that will say there's something more than just this life that I'm living right now that is important to me. And so there's a fear of people that comes into our lives that causes us to cower as Christians, causes us to live in fear. You know, I'm going to be going to Goldendale this Friday. Our family gave each other a Christmas gift. Instead of buying packages, we said we're going to each spend a day together. Whoever's name we draw, spend a day just with them. And so I drew Joelle's name, and I said, Joelle, I'm going to take you to Goldendale, which is where I went through the first 5 grades. I want to show you where the church was, where this thing and that thing happened. One of the things that I remember from Goldendale is that it was the days of the Cold War. Russia, Khrushchev was going to bury us. I heard what was happening there. They were persecuting Christians. They were wanting to take over America. I had heard the first thing they went for was the pastors. My dad was a pastor. I thought, if they come, my dad's going. I thought, what's going to happen to me? We had, one of the things I'm going to show Joelle is, this is the route I took home in the bomb raids we had in those days. We would have bomb raids, nuclear attack threats. We would hide under our desks. We actually went home from school. They would let us out of school to get home as a preparation in case the Russians were attacking. there was a lot of fear in my life in those days. I'd be out riding my bicycle out the wheat fields out of Goldendale, see an airplane overhead. I think, uh-oh, am I going to see bombs dropping out of that? But I came to realize, what? I thought, what if they put a gun to my head, said, deny your faith in Jesus? Even as a child, I came to the conclusion, there's no question. Yes, I love Jesus. I'm not going to deny him. I think it's harder to obey in the smaller things, daily living, than it is perhaps even in that. But the people of Peter's day there that were going through the persecutions, he wanted them to understand there's something beyond just this life, something that's far beyond the persecutions of this life are not worthy to be revealed. And so I'd like us just to sing that, oh, I am a child of God. Oh, I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Stand up for Jesus. Stand up for Jesus. The strife will not be long. This day, the noise of battle, the victor's song. To him that overcome, a crown of life shall be. He with the King of glory shall reign eternally. Well, at ease, we're not done yet. I got a little bit more to share. There is a verse in Romans 8 that says, verse 17, and if children, then heirs. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. If we're, and the verses ahead of that are talking about the Spirit of the Spirit of God witnessing with our spirit, the Spirit of sonship. If children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him, in order that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. That in verse 21, that the creation itself will also be set free from its bondage to corruption, obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. Even creation itself is groaning. Looking forward to that day when God will return and things will be set right. But as we are going through our sufferings that are not worthy to be compared with the glory that will be revealed, I was thinking when those 40 soldiers marched through the gates of heaven, to see Jesus and be clear of all the things in their lives, I can in my mind hear the Braveheart cry, freedom! And all creation is going to cry, freedom. There is a freedom. Somebody has said, you're not really ready to live until you're ready to die. You're not afraid of dying. What can they do to you? They couldn't intimidate these 40 soldiers and many others that were under the persecution of that day. But I've thought, I just have an idea there's going to be a 40-member men's choir in heaven that I'm going to get to hear personally. I'm going to, there are historical records of those 40 men, what their names are. Among them is Aglios, the jailer, to get to talk to him, say, what did you see, Aglios? What caused you to throw off your armor and run out and join with us so there could still be 40 brave soldiers? I think maybe they're going to beckon for, Stephen, the first known Christian martyr that was being stoned to death, and looks up and sees the heavens open, the glory of God, and Jesus standing to welcome him home. And as he was walking through the gates of heaven, I think maybe Stephen was yelling, "Freedom!" I think of the 5 missionaries that perished in the river, along the river there in Ecuador. Jim Elliot, one of them who was told he was crazy to go to waste his life in some far-off mission field. He could have been a successful pastor or evangelist here in the United States. Jim Elliot made the famous statement, "A man is no fool who gives up what he can't keep to gain what he can't lose." He laid down his life. He gave up what was going to be taken from him someday anyhow. He gained something that could never be taken from him. The last song that those 5 missionaries sang before they went out the next day in their plane and landed on the river and established contact with the Indians who speared them was "We Rest in Thee." It's to the tune of Finlandia, da, 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 da. But one of those lines talks about through gates of pearly splendor. And Elizabeth Elliot, Jim Elliot's wife, wrote the book Through Gates of Splendor, describing, and as I mentioned a week or two ago, as the native people there, as they were spearing them, they saw bright lights, supernatural beings, and a choir singing as those guys were going into eternity through gates of splendor. As a result of what they did, there was a missions movement that sprang up. What the enemy intended for wrong, God used for good, and it's the families of these missionaries. Some of them were actually raised in that tribe later, baptized in the river where their fathers were killed by the native people who had pushed the spears through their internal organs of their father. But they had a sense that we're just exiles. Those 5 missionaries, we're just exiles here. This isn't it. Suffering here is going to make us a doorway for God to reach the hearts of other people, and that's a lot different than worrying what's going to happen to me, living in fear. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I am going to someday enter into eternity, and I want to do it with a crown on my head. I want to do it with people that are alongside of me to join in. I suspect those 40 brave soldiers for Christ will make room for Stephen, for those 5 missionaries, and countless other thousands, tens of thousands through the years that have made it through those difficult circumstances. But there is one song that I just love. And it was I couldn't even hardly find it on the internet when I was looking for it. Finally did, but it's called the Martyr song. A guy named Eric Nelson, back maybe 40 years ago, wrote it. But it has in it, the last line says, "I could hear them sing a song of freedom. Some of them were just children, others bowed with age, dressed alike in tattered garments like fools upon the stage. And in that crowd I could hear their voices through the sound of chains. I could hear them sing that song of freedom as they marched in single file. I could hear the lions roar. Flames swept through their broken bodies, falling by the score. In the light
good things.